Well, thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure. Guys, I can't tell you, I really am happy to be here. I'm 80 years old. I've been in racing in some form for 66 years. I've been a lot of places, met a lot of people, and this is about as fine a group as I've hung around, and I just am impressed. I'm impressed with the way your series is run. I got to talk with some of your drivers today. They're all, the ones I talked to all had class. They were competitors. They wanted to run hard. They had respect for other people. And when Dan called me and invited me to come up here, I was aware of your group, but I didn't know anything. But when he told me that you ran so many cars and so many races, I was enthused. And then when he told me that you based a lot of his approach to you guys on safety, I was impressed. And then when he told me they were happy to have a family-oriented and respectable group, I was committed. I've been impressed. He impressed me. You folks impressed me. And here I'm going to tell you some stories. Probably get around mostly just talking to some about Dale Earnhardt Sr. That seems to be the most popular question I got. But I'm a pretty blessed man. Like I said, I've been involved in racing for 66 of 80 years. I've got more friends than any one man is entitled to have. I can't count the number of friends that I have, and I added greatly today. I've met just a bunch of neat folks. Before I get to the story, I'm going to, I guess, mention one other thing that in all my years, I've experienced, I've been through some down times I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, and I've enjoyed moments few men can dream of. I just can't believe how many different things that I've done. I didn't realize that until I started to write the book, and it was hard for me to keep track of the details. But before I get to the Dale Earnhardt stuff, I want to just give you a little clue as to how I got into racing. I was not born into a racing family. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I was born 30 miles west of Detroit, in a farm at the end of a dirt road. We lived in a one-room converted ice house. It was one room, had one light and one door. I didn't have any shoes till I was 3 years old. You don't know nothing when you're young. It's the same and everything. But I'm just saying I wasn't given anything. We moved to the farm. I went to room. We went to live in a basement of an unfinished house. I'm an old person. Some of you folks might not understand all this, but I did until the third grade. I walked 3 miles each way to school. I have ridden in a one-horse open sleigh. I drank milk straight from the cow. I wrote one of the stories in my book called Two Pair Beats a Full House. And then walking to school in Howell, Michigan, I walked 2 miles and 3/4 and came across there's a family, a blended family, had 15 kids between them. 2 of the boys were in the same grade as I was. This was a one-room schoolhouse. It had 12 grades, but it only had people in 9 grades. There were only 26 people in the whole school. These 2 Smith brothers took turns wearing a pair of shoes to school. In this one-room schoolhouse, we took turns ringing the bell. I got sent home early one day. The 2 Smith brothers and my friend Jimmy Peach and I got sent home from school early for trying to tip over the outhouse. And 2 girls ratted on us. They told the teacher as soon as she came out of the outhouse. She wasn't enthused at that time. We went home, went to a place where a building had gotten knocked over, and I got in there with my friend Jimmy Peach. I write a story about that called Bitten by a Peach. We got in there and a rabid dog cornered us in there. It was a dog cornered us. That damn dog bit me till he didn't have no ass left and laid down next to me. He just bit me till he was tired. They counted more than 106 bites. I had to get them needles in your stomach for 10 days. I didn't much care for that. But grew up, went into high school, had a girlfriend or two, and Again, we didn't have much money. I mowed grass for my stuff, and I bought a Wizard motorbike and a go-kart. And the go-kart was a third hand, the go-kart, and I tore up the front yard and tore up the backyard, and my dad didn't care for that, so he took me to a go-kart track in Franklin, Ohio. And I was found out that on Saturday nights you could race them rascals, and it was all over. That's the start for me. I'm telling you, right then when I found out you could race, I was in. I wasn't so good at the start, and I have a pair of leathers with sprocket marks up the back to show you I couldn't keep out of everybody's way. I worked on up where I had a go-kart with a 250cc TDY 1A motorcycle, had midget tires on it, and I had a speeding ticket from the end of it, just past the hook on the backstretch at Mid-Ohio, 126 miles an hour. Probably a second and a half after they took my speed limit, I hit the curb and there's a dent in that chain link fence 4 feet off the ground where I missed that turn at the bottom of that backstretch. Got into sports cars, built a car with a mid-engine car, a fiberglass car with a mid-engine Chevrolet in it, and got married and started a family. And what got me into stock car racing was 10 days before Christmas, in '69, I lost my wife and 2 little girls in a car wreck. I didn't much care for that, and I didn't much care for the memory, so I took off. And my first job was I worked for a guy named Howard Milliken in Brownsville, Indiana, west of Indianapolis. Brownsburg. And was working for a guy named Howard Milliken. They called him Tilt because he'd been in a sprint car accident. One leg was shorter than the other. And we were building 2 cars for Indianapolis. One was a traditional Offie-powered car that Rick Muther drove. He made the race and I think finished 8th. The other was for Jigger Savoyce, an Indy driver. He tried to qualify the last turbine car, and he couldn't do it. They reduced the annual inlet area from 24 to 12, and he could go through the turns, but he just couldn't get out of his own way going down the straightaway. And while we were there, this was 1970, 2 doors down from us was A.J. Foyt, and he was beefing and moaning about his scrawny taxi cab driver. Was having a hard time getting his second car going. Well, he got the second car going. He made the show. He qualified 28th, finished on the lead lap, finished 4th, flew home to Charlotte the next day and won the World 600. Came back to Indianapolis and got his award for Rookie of the Race. 4 years later, I was the car chief for that driver. It was Donnie Allison. Bobby Allison will tell you Donnie Allison is the better driver of those two. I spent a lot of time with Bobby. I got out, that job was, I wasn't earning any money, I just was a gopher. So I found a job at Nichols Engineering when they were running the Pontiacs, so David Pearson was driving the car, and a rather shady gentleman was sponsoring the car. I guess if you read the book, you'll find out I went to jail for the second time for being rude. It was pretty nasty. I severed a guy's big toe with a hammer. It was a big frickin' hammer, too. He was whipping my butt till I hit him with that hammer. He eased up a little bit when I did it. So we had to, he was bleeding really bad. I mean, toe came out of his tennis shoe. He was, maybe don't need to go too far with that, but the cops came to pipe, and the ambulance people came, the cops came. He was a hittie and I was a hitter, so there I was. They took me to jail. I thought I was in jail in Chicago, and I didn't want no part of that. And I just lost my family. I didn't have any kids, no friends, no relatives, nothing. I just figured somebody was going to find my butt in Chicago sometime. And kind of a long story, but a driver for, this is the truth, a driver for a mafia member got me out of jail. Squared everything up, went back to work, and that was over. Well, I didn't want to hang around there either, so I followed a guy down to Ellerbe, North Carolina, went to work for Benny Parsons in 1972. We worked a lot of hours. When I lost my family, I had an engineering job. I designed office buildings and shopping malls and that sort of stuff. I was making decent money at the time, and my mom has always been supportive, but she almost disowned me when I told her I went to work for $100 a week. It was $100 cash, but 190 and 80-hour weeks were the norm. I was working for $1 an hour. We'd race 32 races in a year. Two or three guys. Benny only had 2 cars. We'd work so hard sometimes that Travis Carter, the crew chief, and I, we would get in fights in the parking lot to see who was going to drive first and who was going to be in the sleeper first. I've been, Travis and I especially, for Benny Parsons, there were many days where we ate 3 breakfasts in the same set of clothes. If you were traveling, the driver ran the truck. If you were riding, you didn't like the air conditioning. If you didn't like the air conditioning, you drove and set the air conditioner. If you didn't like the radio, you drove and set the radio. And if you, can I say pee?
Yeah.
If you had to pee, and the driver didn't want to, you had to deal with it. Here's how I dealt with that. I drilled a 1-inch hole in the middle of the passenger compartment and put a funnel under the seat. It's my first experience in aerodynamics, and this is true, because there was pressure under the truck. You know, we weren't going 100 miles an hour or nothing, but there's a lot of crap underneath there. It's real turbulent. And I'll admit I was a little hesitant to reveal my junk on I-40 going 60 miles an hour. Even if I knew that guy, I didn't want to brag. So maybe you put that funnel in there, and if you push it away from you just a little bit and whiz in it, everything's fine. But if you pull that funnel towards you a little bit to sort of hide the view, the pressure and the turbulence underneath the truck would not let all that go down. Some of it came back, and it would, kind of wet your weenie in the 2 neighbors' seat. You learned how to hold it. You learned about the funnel, and you learned about some aerodynamics. It didn't seem that funny at the time. Then went to work for Joe Frasson, and in '73, that's when I hurt my leg. The worst accident that NASCAR ever had at Talladega was because they started 68 cars. I was working for Joe Frasson, and he was in the race. We actually qualified pretty good, 12th. We're on the 4th lap. Ramos stopped, lost a motor in a Junie Dunleavy car, and he spun him and a couple guys, and they came down off the second turn, and there was no infield guardrail at the time, and the ground was all dirt. There was no grass, so it blew up lots of dirt. The dust and the dirt went over the racetrack. The dust made it on the track. The clouds you couldn't see very well. They lost 10 or 12 cars. And we had radio, so I called Joe and asked him if he was all right. I didn't hear anything. It was a little while before he called back on the radio, and he said, that effing driver, I don't want to say his name, just hit me. One driver went through the wreck the first time. Talladega is 2.7 miles long. He went all the way around that racetrack and spun in that dirt and hit my driver. And he was mad. So Joe says, we're going to need a windshield. So the deal was on the speedways, if you come in, you take the windshield out, tell him to go back around so you don't lose a lap under caution. When he comes in, he put the windshield back in. When he left, something didn't seem right, so I called Joe. I asked him, what driver's uniform have you got on? He said he had a Union 76, and asked me why. Union 76 uniforms are a light tan, and he was red when he pulled out of the pits. So when he came back in to get the windshield in, I looked in. I could see 4 inches of Joe Frasson's forearm. The sheet metal had come in when this guy backed into him, dislodged the interior sheet metal and cut it up. And so I said, Joe, I can't send you out like that. And he said, you work for me. If you don't put that windshield in, I'm gonna come out there and kick your butt. I wasn't too inclined to do that, but I didn't think I could send him back out like that. I said, how are you gonna steer? He asked me to tape up his arm and tape his hand to the steering wheel. And you can't. You don't care if you work for him or not. You can't send a guy out there like that. So I raised the hood, and I wish I hadn't done it now, but I reached in there and pulled that coil wire off. Bit me hard. But shut the motor off. And to his word, he got out of that car with one hand. He thought he was going to kick my butt. But he got about 4 steps and passed out. Racing, it ain't like it is now. It's just not. So next year I went to work with Cecil Gordon. We ran, I think, 26 races with Cecil, and the guy named Mario Rossi hired me to go to work on Donnie Allison's car while they were still in Hueytown, Alabama. Those Alabama boys know how to build cars, and they know how to race cars. With due respect for anybody I've worked at in the last 40 years, them boys know their stuff. Donnie, I've written a book, an unpublished book about vehicle dynamics, and one of the things that I'm most thankful for was that Donnie Allison, we'd go nose to nose and argue like a son of a gun, but he always treated me with respect. And if you ever met Donnie or know anybody that's hung around him, he had this habit of coming up and poking his finger in your chest and saying, "I'll tell you one thing," and pretty much you listened. But he taught me that I did a lot of reading. I thought I knew about chassis and stuff, but Donnie knew. He spent the time with me over a couple of years. He convinced me if what this word was feels like this. He made me understand what it was that you felt in a car based on some of the words and the technology stuff. And I'm just a big freak for those numbers and that sort of stuff. We moved from Hueytown to a shop on Fentress Boulevard, right across the street from the entrance to the Daytona. We used to get in the car. Donnie would get in the car. I'd get in the car with a toolbox. Rossi'd come over in a pickup truck, and we'd drive that car 2 blocks down Central Boulevard, turn left, and go through the bus entry to get into the track, because Donnie knew the guy that ran the gate for the tour bus. And if you scheduled an event, there'd be newspaper reporters and all that, people checking your times and watching what you were doing. But he got the bus driver to let us go through, close the bus gate, lock down the track, and we could make 3 or 4 laps before anybody knew we were there, and we'd come back. And don't ride with Donnie Allison at Daytona. He run up against a wall, and he, maybe to this day, has a bruise in a sensitive area because I asked him to cease and desist. He's in a driver's seat with a helmet and seat belt and all that stuff. I'm sitting over there hanging out to a wedge bar. I didn't want no part of that. I didn't like that at all. I quit riding in cars. We built a car that sat on a pole for the Daytona 500 in '75. That same car sat on a pole in the Firecracker 400. In between there, we set it was a world record for changing tires. Unical had a '76 pit crew competition. We won that. And one of the reasons we won was because the crew chief was instrumental, and I don't know if you guys don't make pit stops, but in NASCAR, the pit stops got really fast when they started gluing the lug nuts to the wheels. This was Mario Rossi's idea. We would modify our guns. We'd take the air guns apart, soup them up. We put 1-inch extensions on the studs and shaped them like a bullet, and then added 2 inches to the dust covers. So when you put the glue had to be on there at least 15 minutes, or the lugs would fall off when you stood the tire up. And if you wasted more than 45 minutes and you pushed them on over the studs, sometimes they'd pop off and drop. So it was kind of important that you timed this gluing to when you anticipated to stop. And the situation was you'd put this tire up, line it on the dust cover, and rotate it till the studs lined up, and then you'd push it. The lug nuts would separate from the glue and be sitting there on those little bullet things. But the trick that worked for us was getting the sockets to go on. If you used a 6-point, the lugs would stick on and you had to stop the gun. We ended up getting a Craftsman 12-point deep well socket, milling out the inside, every of the lugs on the inside, and then we inserted a spring. And the trick was to make that spring be strong enough that it would eject the nut and leave it on that stud. And if you were really, really good, the trick was you'd pull a trigger and push it on and just keep going to different studs. And if you were really good, 2 lugs would still be spinning on their stud, on their stud when you put this one off. And we'd run a night race once in a while, and if you were, again, get those to drop off, them nuts would run around there and spark in the dark. And I knew somebody that was really good at that. I got fired Monday after the 4th of July race by a guy who didn't know anything about racing. He was brother of the owner. To this day, it's the only job I've ever been fired from. To this day, I don't know why I got fired. But it was that moment when I crawled off that truck. This guy was a Connecticut Yankee. I'd been hanging around with Donnie, Allison, and I can, as clear as about when I got off the truck and was walking to my car, I became a NASCAR redneck. I'd been in there, I guess, 5 or 6 years, and compared to that guy, I was a redneck, and I've kind of portrayed that. I was born in, I told you, in Detroit. But 3 days later, I went to work for a team in Indianapolis, reunited with that IndyCar driver, Jigger Savoy. A guy named Tom Adams was wanting to get his team ready to go down to down south and run with NASCAR, so they hired me to come up and kind of get their cars ready and their pit equipment and teach the guys pit stops and that sort of thing. And right before Christmas, we thought we were getting a bonus. We got laid off because his accountant said he could either continue to race or continue to be married, but it wasn't going to be both, so he shut the shop down. So I'm 2 times in 1 year, I'm out of a job. I had enough of that. That was real common back in the day. They'd lay off guys. The sponsors would get mad at the owner would get mad at the crew chief, and he had to do something. So the first thing he did was let somebody go. It was real common to just switch jobs. You never knew you were going. I got tired of moving around. And if you're going to build race cars, you need to do it in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I went to Charlotte, bought a piece of property in Fort Mill, South Carolina, and started up my own shop. And at the same time, I was working with Ralph Moody from Holman Moody and Humpy Wheeler, a multiple award-winning track promoter from the Charlotte Motor Speedway. He did that for 23 years. He was always trying to put together a special program to attract sponsors. And while I was with Ralph Moody, we became the team that prepared Janet Guthrie's car. She had a little trouble at Indy. So he brought her down, and I write I don't know what the title of it is, but I write about that year with Janet Guthrie and Ralph Moody. She was a real bright lady. I think she was a reasonably capable driver, but she didn't understand redneck no kind of way. She's way too sophisticated, and I'm pretty sure she still doesn't eat cornbread and grits. She didn't last very long either. So next year, I'm working in my shop. I'm hanging cars. I built fixtures. I could build a car from scratch. I probably built 63 or 64 Winston Cup cars and repaired a bunch of cars, put bodies on cars. The third race, I guess like Rockingham, I get a call from Al Rudd Sr., Ricky Rudd's dad, and Humpy had called him, and they were having trouble keeping their stuff together coming out of Chesapeake Bay, so they brought their stuff. So I was Ricky Rudd's crew chief the year he ran Rookie of the Year, and you know now, teams have got 80 to 100 guys per car, per team, per number, and 40 to 50 cars. In writing this book, the title of that story is Rooster Tales, because you may know they called Ricky Rooster for being such a feisty little fella. But I called him to confirm this. We won Rookie of the Year. Ricky and I ran 25 races together. 10 of those races, we finished in the top 10. We had 1 car, and I had 2 employees. I'm as proud of that probably as anything. They ran out of money. So again, over the winter, I'm building cars and skinning. And at the 1st of May in 1978, Humpy calls me, wanted to know if I'd be interested in being the crew chief and the car owner for a black stock car driver. And my only question was, can I get some help getting a competitive car and some sponsorship? And he said, yes, we've got this covered. And he said that the driver was going to be Willie T. Ribbs. He's an accomplished sports car driver, pretty charismatic guy. He's raced quite a bit. I know he competed at Indianapolis. And he was personable, and he came up. We took the car to Charlotte and practiced a little bit, and he wasn't doing so good. Humpy was getting frustrated. He was drawing. There's unical balls around the thing and gates and different signs on the thing. And Humpy Wheeler knew how you should drive around Charlotte. So he was telling him on a napkin where to be on the track, and he just couldn't cut it. So the second day, Willie comes by us, goes about 4 pit stalls down, right up next to the wall, when he gets out of the car, he steps over to the far wall. To this day, I haven't seen Willie T. Ribbs again. So the next day, Humpy calls me, says, you're going to hear your name on the TV tonight. I had to send Willie back to San Jose. And, you know, I'm concerned, have I lost this deal? Am I going to have some work or not? And insert here why he got sent back to California. I don't know if any of you read this, so this happened in 78. Humpy had let him use the Charlotte Motor Speedway car, had Charlotte Motor Speedway painted all over it. He took it back and he got caught running the wrong way on Queens Avenue in downtown Charlotte. The cops let him up. He pulled over and ran. He sees this door open to a gymnasium in Charlotte, North Carolina, one of the basketball capitals of the United States. He goes in there and picks up a basketball and he starts shooting hoops. Figure nobody's gonna, this does not look out of place at all. It's a black man in Charlotte shooting hoops in the basketball. The cops come in, push him up against the wall. They're handcuffing him. He said, "What the hell gave this away?" He said, "Son, if you'd read that sign outside the door, this is an all-girls school." So he got sent back to San Jose. So the sportscaster was Howard Johnson from WSOC in Charlotte. And when he started announcing, he said, "Well, Cronkrite's had to send his driver back home, or he's needing a new driver or something." He didn't get that first sentence out of his line, out of his mouth. When Dale called me, and Dale and I weren't buddies or friends, but I'd spent some time with him, figuring out we were breaking some front springs. And as a side note, I don't know if you know, his dad, Ralph, was a big-time dirt racer, and one of the reasons he won so much was everybody was breaking axle keys. He found a certain brand of screwdrivers that was the right size for the key. He'd cut the handle and the tip off of it, and he went around every store he could find in Charlotte that sold that brand of screwdrivers and bought them up. He had 3 suitcases full of these screwdrivers, so nobody else would have them. And Dale showed me some of those in a box. I actually got the hold of. So I spent some time at his shop. His mom, who just passed away, she fixed us peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on that back porch to his place. She was an awful nice lady. She suffered a great deal. She died here just a couple weeks ago, and before that, her other son Danny died. And she's had a rough life, but she was a pretty nice lady. So Harold Johnson's still talking about this on the TV, and Dale Sr. called, "Can I drive that car?" I said, "It's not mine to determine." He had to talk to Humpy. He says, "Do you care if I call Humpy?" He said, "No." Harold Johnson's still talking about it. Humpy calls me, says, "You care?" I say, "No." Dale called me, says, "I'm coming down." This was a Tuesday, and at Charlotte Motor Speedway, they always qualified on Wednesday, and then the 2 guys Thursday and Friday and Saturday you practice. So we had to be to the track in the morning, and if you've, when he came down, he'd bring me seat. He lived 56 miles away from me, and he was down there in 42 minutes. If you watch a Dale Jr. download, he was a pretty crafty young man back in his days on the street. So he comes down, he drives up in his like 56, 57 blue Ford pickup. Pretty nice. And when he gets out, he comes over on the passenger side and rolls the window down halfway, and this little blonde-haired 4-year-old boy stuck his nose over that glass and them hands over the edge. And we all know who that was. That was Dale Jr. But he stays in the car. Dale and I we probably worked 4 hours fitting the seat. I was impressed with his desire to run well the next day. He'd been in 3 other races, but he totaled 2 of the cars. He just was he was not having any luck at all. Nobody would give him a ride. But he came down and we fit the seat. He's been known for doing his own seats. He to the last day, built his own seats. So we bring this seat down, we cut this up, and I figure if he wants to fix the seat, we're going to change some holes in the bracket of his seat to fit my frame. That didn't work, so we moved the mounting brackets back. That didn't work, so we made new brackets. Then we cut the seat rails out. That didn't work, so we ended up in what was my new car. It was a car we got from Bud Moore. Only it's a brand new car, had 4 races on it, sat on the pole twice, and Buddy Baker won Talladega in this car. It was no piece of crap. It was a good piece. And I'm impressed that this guy that's not very well known at this time was willing to make me cut the darn floor out of my car. But he did, and like I said, I'm a big freak about vehicle dynamics and stuff, and so I was okay with it because he was sitting down in the car and he wanted to sit back. All of those things I was happy with. And he says, you don't know why we're doing this, do you? And you guys that are crew chiefs, if you don't do what your driver wants, he ain't going to give you no leg. You got to do what he wants. So we did this. He says, get in there and I'll show you. So I get in and I sit down. That was when I could get in them seats. And he says, if you run that car into the first turn at Charlotte, you come low enough till you hit that bump going into one. He said, where's that car in front of you? And I just pointed out to the wall in front of me. I'm not a driver, so other than go-karts, I didn't do anything with a windshield on it. And he kind of shrugged his shoulder. Have you seen that big Cheshire cat grin he's got? He said, where's the car in front of him? And I pointed out there again. He grinned at me again. He said, no. He says, when you run that thing down in there, that car in front of you is over here in front of your left headlight. That car in front of him is up here at the corner of the top of the A-post. The light went on, and I've been a fan of Dale Earnhardt since then. He was willing to muscle me into making that change because he was so enthused and knowledgeable about what he wanted. He wanted to make an impression. We knew we had a good car. He didn't want to screw it up. We got the car ready, and in the store, I write a couple of stories in the book about that. I didn't have a good trailer, so I wanted to borrow one from one of my customers, a guy named Leon Boomershine from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. I was putting a body on the car he bought from Darrell Waltrip. My trailer was such a piece of crap, I didn't want to take it up there when everybody else was up there. So I called Leon and asked him if I could borrow his trailer, and he said no. But I figured I could get to Charlotte and back before he could get here from Oklahoma, so I borrowed it. And we made the newspaper, and he saw that, and he was a little irate, but he didn't give me no crap. So we get there, and Humpy says, come up here, I got a sponsor, come to the office, I'll give you some money. He gave me $3,500, which I just thought was hot stuff in 1978. I was real happy to have $3,800. I come back down, the sign painter's putting the name Cardinal Tractor on the side of the car, and this big tall guy comes up. He says, I own that tractor company. He says, I got some money for you. He gave me an envelope, had $3,500 in it. Man, this race is pretty cool. I should have done this years ago. But it dawned on me that $3,500 that Humpy gave me was front money for this guy. So that money I just put in my back pocket because I knew I had to give to Humpy. Well, we did good. We didn't qualify with the crap, and we weren't kicking anybody's butt, but we were passing cars, and Dale never put a scratch on my car. And part of the money that I got, I bought a set of radios. I was real proud that I could talk to my driver, on the headset. I'm in pit road, and I got this headset and mic, I'm thinking I'm pretty cool. And Dale, and if you've been on the super speedway, when you're running into the tri-oval under flag stand, that's a scary place. You need to be hanging on with both hands. And my radio key was on the side of the door. It was not on the steering wheel. I don't know why I did that, but it wasn't. So he's coming off of 4, right where the guardrail takes a step back. You can get sucked in there real early, but he really easily. But just as he got past that, he keyed the mic, and somebody was mirror driving him. Run down low, and Dale come in behind. He just kept running lower. He says, I'm tired of this effing guy. Do you care if I spin this guy out? Well, I'm okay if he spins that guy out, but I asked him, can you do it without crashing our car? And he didn't say nothing. But he says, I'm going to give him 3 laps. He come by, sure enough. He goes down. His name's Baxter Price. Went down, come around. He went down. Baxter went down in front of him. Just as Dale comes by that little offset, just before he gets to the flag stand, he says, I'm going to do it now. Watch this. That guy went down. He ran him down. He went down again. This guy went down. He drove right across the back of his spoiler, lifted the dash of that thing up, and he went up sideways, and Dale drove underneath him. He says, I told you I was going to do it. He called it, and he did it. If you ever hear anybody say that Dale Earnhardt can see air, you believe him. He was the last guy to go to a full-face helmet. So we're done with this race. We make a commitment to go to 4 more races with that same sponsor. When we're collecting our money at the pay window, I give Humpy Wheeler, Humpy Wheeler comes by and says, how'd you like your first attempt with a car owner? And he said, you finished good. I don't know, we finished 12th or something. And I got $4,800. I thought that was pretty cool, but I had to give this money back to Humpy. And so when he came and asked me that, I said, here, Humpy, I got this $3,500. I said, I know this is yours. I apologize for not giving it back to you sooner. and he looked at my old truck, and this is my favorite picture of my time with Dale. I pulled that car with a 1964 fleet side pickup, this stolen trailer, and I bought tires and pit equipment, all kind of stuff. So this truck, the trailer hitch is almost in the ground, the trailer's pointing down. It's Sanford and Son all over again. My dad wouldn't even ride home with me from the racetrack. It was so embarrassing to him. But it looked like that as we were getting ready to go home at the pay window, and Humpy looked at that. He took that money, opened it up a little bit, and he looked up and he saw that old truck and that old trailer. He gave me that $3,500 back, told me to go buy a truck. And I did. We went and bought the Huggins tire truck, and I got a Reed trailer. It was a diamond plate trailer. It was the same thing that Bud Moore and Petty and all them guys had. That was hot stuff. It was a used one, but it was a Reed trailer. So we went to Daytona, and I was on the Dale Jr. download or whatever that thing's called about 6 or 7 weeks ago. And if you ever watch that show, one of my 96 cars is sitting on that table. And he commented it to me during that show that he felt that car was on that trailer because he thought the way Dale ran in my car is what gave him his opportunity. And this opportunity came at this Daytona race. We had Bud Moore stuff under the car, Charlotte, and we did really well, but I put my stuff under the car. We went to Charlotte, to Daytona for the Cracker 400. And there's days when your ride works and there's days when your ride doesn't. We were on it. This car was fast. Bud Moore freshened up the motor. We put the high exhaust port heads on it. We just were right. We were good. We were fast. We qualified 12th or something. We got him behind on some crappy pit stops. And so he's running. We're 2 laps down. And the leaders have come up on him, the 4 fast guys. We're 16, 17 laps from the end of the race. And a caution comes out. But they did not just come up on him and blow by. He was holding his own. The car, we were okay. Caution comes out. There's about 15 laps to go, so I know them fast guys are all going to load up on 4 tires. I just short pitted him, put 2 tires and just enough gas to finish. And so we got out ahead of them again. And those guys, I don't remember who they were. Kale was one of them, Petty was one, and Pearson was one of them. I don't know who the 4th one was. They couldn't get around him. He was giving them everything that shoe on they could stand. I can still see this. He just was running their ass ragged. Well, they got around him. They had better cars and they had more experienced drivers, but it took them 5 or 6 laps to go around, and he followed them till the end of the race. And 2 of those drivers, Pearson was one, and the guy I can't remember, I think was the other one, came down after that race and said, you did okay, boy, or something like that. And so because of that, I know that Rod Osterlund got a hold of him to try to talk to him about running for him next year. And you can run 5 races in 1 year and not lose your eligibility for rookie the next year. And we had committed to 5 races. We ran 4 races. We ran Darlington. We out-qualified Bud Moore with his own car. But we gave a crappy pit stop, and then we lost a gear, I think we finished 15th or something. We were like 42 laps down. We sucked. And in Talladega, we ran really, really good. Just nothing special, nothing to brag about. But come time to go back to Charlotte, he called me and he said, Rod Osterlund wants me to drive his car next year, run for Rookie of the Year. They want me to run one race this year in one of the Rod Osterlund cars. And he wanted to know if I would let him out of driving that 5th race. Well, Rod Osterlund had 6 or 8 cars, 3 bags of money, and I couldn't with clear conscience tell him no. I don't suspect he would have anyway, but I said, feel free to do it. So we got Baxter Price, qualified the car, and Dale got in at the first caution, and Dale Earnhardt finished that race for me. He didn't have to. He could have sat back, whistled or done whatever, but he said he'd drive 5 races. He drove in 5 races. He was a man of his word. And just as an add-on here, he had a pretty bad persona on the racetrack. He was a better driver than other people could see. They thought he was doing things, and he wasn't. They jumped all over him for spinning a car. I can't remember his name at Rockingham. The guy was leading the race, And he was really smart. Coming off turn 4 at Rockingham, the track was really, really rough. And so Dale worked him down there. You could see him doing it. Ernie Irvin, yeah, it was him. And he worked him down, and he was leading the race, and he spun out, and Dale won. And Dale was under his quarter when it happened. So they just were madder than snot. Yeah, you spun him out, you're a dirty racer. But he called him over, and you looked, there was not one single scratch on the left rear quarter panel of that car. He made him go down there, pulled up, side drafted him, and he just couldn't hold on to it. They said he could see air. I did some work in a Burt Reynolds movie, the Stroke Race movie, and we happened to be at Talladega when they were doing a tire test, and those big teams don't like their driver to be driving somebody else's car. Bud knew he'd driven my car, and 2 of my cars were in the movie, but the stunt guys were having trouble racing it on turn 3, and he drove my car, both the cars, and he said, there's nothing wrong with the car, you're just going to have to teach him to drive it. But what he told me, if you run in the upper part of the racetrack going into turn 3, instead of getting off the gas or stepping on the brakes, you keep your foot on the brake and trail brake a little bit. It keeps the left rear trailing arm from unloading. They did that, and everything's going fine. But when one of the stunt guys said, first they asked him, is there anything wrong with that car? And he said, no. He says, are you having trouble? He said, yeah. And he said to me, here's my mom's phone number. She can drive this car. The car was nice. It was nice. So he embarrassed those guys, and the other stunt guy says, can you see air? He got asked this even back then. And he told me, he was talking to me, he said, well, you know at Darlington, where the grandstand addition steps down and is a little closer to the drag strip, or to the pit wall, he says, I can tell if the fat lady in the front row gets up and goes after popcorn. And he shared with me, I drive one of them cars in the movie, and I was not doing so good either. I thought the car was just jumping all over. I just thought something was wrong. So I come in, I think I'm scaring myself. So I come in, take the seat belts off, put that tape over the center of the steering wheel and tighten up the seat belt. I go back out and this thing's jumping around again. And he said, you guys probably know this, on them speedways, those cars just jump around. And you can tell if you're running along a concrete block wall and you go to an Armco barrier, go by a gate, all that stuff will upset the car. So that's just the way it was. I do want to tell you, I've been a lot of places and seen a lot of people. This is a nice crowd. You guys have just done an outstanding job. All the drivers that I talked to, I probably said this already, but I'm just impressed. The organization, the quality of the cars, the personality of the drivers, they're all interested, in the mechanical stuff. And I like being around racing people, and you all just made me feel good. I thank you.